Morning. Pleased to be joined today by Vice Chair Aguilar, of course, as well as Assistant Speaker Katherine Clark, and my good friend DCCC Chair Sean Patrick Maloney from New York. We had an amazing January jobs report, which continues the economic growth and the job creation that has occurred under Joe Biden's presidency. In President Biden's first year, 6.6 million jobs have been created. That's more job creation in a president's first year than at any other point in American history. Democrats deliver for the people. Economic growth has increased at the highest rate in 40 years under President Joe Biden. Democrats deliver for the people. When President Biden took office, the unemployment rate was 6.6%. Now it's at 4%. Democrats deliver for the people. There are issues that remain for us to deal with, and Democrats are dealing with them decisively as it relates to inflation and some of our supply chain dynamics. That is why House Democrats passed the America Competes Act. That's going to invest in additional job creation, invest in dealing with the supply chain dynamics that occur, invest in technology and innovation, invest in research and development, invest in America continuing to be a leader in the global economy, and make sure that every single American and every single zip code can pursue the great American dream. A lot has occurred in President Biden's first year in partnership with House Democrats and Senate Democrats, and we're going to continue to deliver for the American people. It's my honor to yield to Vice Chair Pete Aguilar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as the Chairman said, we've been talking about the economic growth that this country has been facing. Some of the best economic growth in the last 4 decades. President Biden and House Democrats saved the American economy from collapse and set the course for unprecedented recovery through the Bipartisan Infrastructure and Investment Act with only a handful of Republican votes. Votes that in some cases led to those members to be exiled from their own party. People are able to return to jobs because of the Biden-Harris administration's efforts to distribute the vaccine across this country. A vaccine, again, that some Republicans in this body continue to undermine each day. And one of the benefits that we have seen under the Biden-Harris administration is the robust support for the Affordable Care Act. More than 14.5 million people signed on, and with the American Rescue Plan, we supported that through more additional resources. House Republicans, if given the opportunity, we know will try to undermine all of those efforts to shore up the Affordable Care Act and provide health insurance to so many Americans. House Democrats won't take our eyes off the ball. We're going to continue to focus on issues that are good for the economy, issues that are good for our communities and our families, and we're going to make sure that we shore up the economy in this country. We'll continue to focus on these issues because that's what we were sent here to do. That's what we've heard from our communities back home, and that's what we know will have a meaningful and lasting impact. With that, I'll turn it over to a leader in our caucus, a good friend of mine, Assistant Speaker Katherine Clark.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair Aguilar and Chairman Jeffries. It is wonderful to be back with all of you and with our illustrious DCCC Chair as well. And good morning. It's a good morning for the American economy. Since 1945, American presidents have outperformed Republican presidents in building a robust economy. And President Biden, with partnership with congressional Democrats, has taken that to a new historic level. 6.6 million jobs created, 4% unemployment, a historic low. And we are just getting started, delivering great jobs, lowering costs, and giving everyone in this country a fair shot. So let's look at what we've done. First, there was the American Rescue Plan that allowed us to get schools open safely. As the vice chair pointed out, expand healthcare for people, free vaccinations, make sure that we were helping families and businesses succeed by getting them the short-term money they needed to survive. Second, we moved on to the infrastructure bill, making the investments we need in our communities, whether that's broadband, clean drinking water, our roads and bridges, and putting into place, improving our ports and airports so that we can help make sure that we can drive down some of these inflationary costs that we're seeing driven by the global pandemic. Third, we passed the Competes Act just last week that's going to further improve our supply chain, bring back manufacturing to our shores, invigorate our semiconductor production, which is not only great for jobs, it is great for lowering costs, and it is great for our national security. And we are not leaving it at that. We also noticed that in the January jobs report, 80% of the people that left the workforce were women. And that's why we are going to continue to negotiate and fight for the Build Back Better agenda. Women are leaving the workforce because they don't have childcare. And we're going to help continue that fight to bring down the cost of childcare, increase that accessibility, make sure that people who are caring for our children and our senior parents are able to have a wage that allows them to care for their own families. And what have we seen from our colleagues across the aisle? No votes for the American Rescue Plan. 13 votes in the House for infrastructure, although 100% of them want to claim those victories back home in those investments. And again, not supporting the Competes Act and helping us create great jobs here. We're going to continue to put the American family first in every piece of work that we do, and we will continue to deliver these wins for them so that they can have the security their families deserve. And with that, I will turn it over to our incredible leader of the DCCC, Sean Patrick Maloney.
Thank you, Catherine, and thank you to the chair and to the vice chair for their remarks. I don't need to repeat what's been said. I will point out that we are, as a team, I think, quite pleased with where we see ourselves. Challenges ahead for the American people, but a plan to meet them. A record of real results on issues of critical importance, from saving small businesses, our economy, our schools, our local communities, to building roads and bridges, and broadband systems, getting every lead pipe out of every drinking water system in America. These are real results for the American people, and a record that we'll be proud to put against the other side's absence of a plan. And with respect to the work that's yet to be done, I did a town hall meeting with seniors this week in my district. A woman named Angela, who's in her early 70s, said that she has MS, and she spends $2,000 a month out of pocket for her medication, $24,000 a year that she can barely afford. And she ends up having to scrounge together the payments or look for programs that will help her or just miss her treatments. We have a plan that would cap her costs at $2,000 a month annually. $2,000 annually would cap her prescription drug costs. Be a life-changing difference for Angela and millions of Americans who depend on prescription drugs to save their lives, but who can't afford them. We're going to get that done, or we're going to compare that position to the position of our opponents. They want to do nothing on that issue, who've resisted it every step of the way. And that's true of preschool, and it's true of child care costs. We want each of you to be spending no more than 7% of your income, a working family, on child care. That would work a miracle in the lives of millions of American families and get women back in the workforce, and together with preschool for 3- and 4-year-olds. Not child care, school for every 3- and 4-year-old in America. Those would be an enormous help to families right now. that are struggling to pay the bills, that want to have good education and good care for their kids when they're at work. We're going to get that done. Or we're going to compare that position to the position of our opponents who have no plan for that and who've been fighting us every step of the way. And I would just say a word quickly about redistricting, where as we come to the end of that process, we look out at a set of districts across America that is very different from the one we heard about so often, so many times over the last year. The fact is that we are going to have a map that is a map we believe is fair, and that we can take that record of results and make the case. And with that, I'll yield back to the chair for your questions.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Sean.
Chairman
Mr.
Jeffries.
Chair, just two quick questions. Do you support staffer efforts to unionize in Congress? And regarding specifically the Competes Act, an amendment was withdrawn from the Competes Act that would have allowed the children of legal immigrants who would be phased out of status from the act. And everybody's kind of wondering, everybody in the immigrant community is kind of wondering why that was. It seemed really non-controversial. Can you speak to that at all?
Yes to the first question. I strongly support those unionization efforts at collective bargaining, fairer wages, making sure people have access to the highest quality benefits. That's in the DNA of the Democratic Party. It will be interesting to see what our Republican colleagues do in that area. With respect to the second part of your question, I'm unfamiliar with the pulling of that amendment, so I can't really speak to it.
Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Emily
Right.
Robertson with CNS News. The U.S. trade deficit with China in 2021 was more than $300 billion for the 10th year in a row. Can the U.S. have free trade with a communist country?
Excuse me, can you ask the last part of that question
Yes.
again?
Can the United States have free trade with a communist country?
Well, I'm not going to speak to any particular bilateral relationship, but I will say that the America Competes Act is going to increase our capacity to be a continued global leader as it relates to the economy, and perhaps most importantly, as Assistant Speaker Katherine Clark indicated, to bring jobs back home, manufacturing jobs, good-paying jobs, to make sure that we can continue to be the leader in technology and innovation. And we're going to get the America Competes Act over the finish line as we negotiate with the Senate a bipartisan agreement that will be an important step in the right direction for the American people.
Mr. Chairman.
Does anyone else want to add anything?
Mr. Chairman.
We're going to go back to this side.
All right, great, thanks. What's happening in New York on redistricting? First of all, can you comment on that? And also, does it undercut Democrat position that independent commissions for redistricting is the way to go?
Well, we have fair maps across the country, as Sean Patrick Maloney indicated. Collectively, as it relates to any particular state, I'm going to hold on commenting on anything, but let me yield to our chair.
I think the chairman said it. Look, bear in mind that in the last election, we won 4.7 million more votes in House races than the Republican Party, and we lost 13 seats. Just hold that fact for a moment. If the House of Representatives doesn't represent the majority of the American people, then what does it represent? It is by definition supposed to reflect the majority will. And yet, with 4.7 million more votes in the House races, we lost 13 seats. So our argument has been, give us fair maps. If they're fair maps, we'll take this record of results into those districts, and we'll make our case. And I think you're seeing that in states like New York.
But is New York a fair map? And, you know, the legislature completely undercut an independent commission. Or a
No,
bipartisan commission.
I don't accept that premise at all. There was an independent commission that had a full opportunity to do its job under the Constitution in New York, and it failed to do that. It failed to present a consensus map as it was required to do, not once, but twice. And at this late point in the process, it's not just an option for it's the responsibility of the Assembly and the Senate to draw a map. They're required to. That's the process. Now, they are held against a standard in the Constitution of not diminishing minority voices and representation, of ensuring that there are communities of interest, that there are certain fair standards in that legislation that will be tested in court. And we're happy to put that map up against that standard. But what I'm telling you is that the maps have been unfair for a long time. You don't have to take my word for it. The Republicans have, for years, gerrymandered the heck out of this country. And if we're seeing some restitution of fair maps, then the popular vote should better align with the results in Congress. And that's all we've ever asked for.
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman? Can I talk about the legitimate political
Hold on
discourse?
one second.
Question on appropriations. Do you expect to get every member of the Democratic Caucus to support both the CR and an omnibus deal?
Well, let me yield to our two appropriators who are here, but I think that Chairwoman DeLauro has done a tremendous job in moving the spending bill forward. We haven't always had the greatest degree of cooperation from our Senate colleagues on the other side of the Capitol. Hopefully, we're seeing those dynamic change. But let me yield to Pete Aguilar and Katherine Clark.
So as we are looking at the CR vote, I think it's important to keep in mind, once again, that a great deal of the infrastructure money is going to be allocated through the CR and the omnibus. And so watch the votes today, because once again, I think you are going to see my colleagues across the aisle going home and bragging about projects in their districts that Democrats have funded, but failing to vote for the CR. That's the vote to watch today on the CR.
What I'd say is we're going to have robust, strong support from our side on the CR and on the omnibus. We want government to work. We want to fund government. We want to make sure that we're accounting for our national priorities. And so, the question is, what's the other side going to do? They've talked about withholding votes for everything because of mask mandates. They want to play chicken with a government shutdown. We want to make government work. So we trust the leadership of Nita Lowey. We'll pass this stopgap measure. Rosa DeLauro. And Nita. I'm an appropriator. I hope Nita gives me a call. No, I have to call Rosa. But we're gonna trust the guidance of Rosa here because we know she has her eyes on the prize, which is to make this place work and to deliver government funding.
Mr. Chairman? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Good morning. You said that on the unionization issue, that this is in the DNA of the party. But the fact that it got to this level, where aides are calling for this, isn't that somehow in the unfortunate DNA of the institution that you have staff who think that they've been abused by members, abused by co-workers, and that there is a lack of a fiduciary responsibility here on behalf of the leadership to make sure that those problems didn't get to that level?
Support the unionization effort that is underway and support the effort to make sure we protect the right to organize all across America. That is why Democrats passed the Protect the Right to Organize Act here in the House. We believe that at the foundation of making sure that every single American can robustly pursue the American dream is the opportunity to organize, to join a union, to fight collectively for better wages, for better benefits, for better health care. That is in the DNA of the Democratic Party. That is very clear, indisputable in my mind, and the track record of what Democrats do here in Congress and what Republicans do here in Congress speaks for itself.
Mr. Chairman, in a couple hours, Ways and Means is going to hear from the National Taxpayer Advocate, who's going to describe a pretty brutal set of staff shortages and backlogs at IRS. I'm wondering, are you all hearing this from your constituents, and is the caucus talking about anything you can do before Build Back Better to help mitigate a horrible tax year?
Well, I'm certainly thankful that Chairman Neal is hosting this particular hearing to try to get to the bottom of what may be happening at the Department of Treasury and at the IRS under the previous administration. The IRS was intentionally gutted as part of the former administration's objective with his co-conspirators in the Republican Party to do everything possible to elevate the fortunes of the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected and prevent them from paying their fair share. That's the bottom line. That's the reality of why we are where we are. I'm thankful that Chairman Neal and the Ways and Means Committee are diving into this issue, and I'm sure subsequent to the hearing we'll come up with some legislative remedies to address the challenge.
And y'all getting a
Anyone
lot
else?
of calls from your constituents about this?
Anyone else? Speak. Thank you.
Yes, on COVID, I wanted to ask you, we saw yesterday a number of states announce that they are soon going to be easing mask mandates. I believe California is ending their indoor mask mandate for vaccinated people under 15. Connecticut, New Jersey announced changes as well. I understand that you respect the decisions of local officials, but I'm wondering just what is your reaction to those restrictions being lifted? Does that give you hope that we are perhaps reaching the end stages of having to have these health measures in place? And then for Congressman Maloney, politically speaking, do you believe it's important for Democrats to be seen as moving on from the pandemic or putting it behind them ahead of the midterms?
Well, here's where we are in America. Job creation is up, wages are up, unemployment is down, and the Omicron variant is in retreat. And that's not by accident. That's because under President Biden's leadership, a public health infrastructure was put into place, beginning with the American Rescue Plan without a single Republican vote, to ensure that we can do everything possible to crush the virus. And that is what has been happening. Through the trials and tribulations of a once-in-a-century pandemic, through the Delta variant, now through the Omicron variant. When President Biden took office, there were 2 million Americans fully vaccinated. 1 year later, more than 200 million Americans fully vaccinated. That doesn't happen by accident. It's because President Biden and Democrats in the House and the Senate have leaned into the science, to the evidence, to standing up a robust public health infrastructure, and now we are seeing the fruits of that work.
I would echo what the chair just put very well. But the direct answer to your question is you better believe it. People are sick to death of this pandemic, and I do believe because of the president's leadership and the Democratic plan to beat the virus, that we will be in a position to communicate a clear off-ramp and to make sure people understand that they will be in a position to care for themselves, for their families, that we trust parents to know best for their children and their schools, and that because of the wide availability of vaccines and better therapeutics, and with the right support for our frontline healthcare workers who have performed heroically, that we can all expect a definite plan for the resumption of our normal lives, and once and for all, put the pandemic behind us. Remembering the extraordinary losses we've suffered as a country and honoring the people who helped us through, but once again asserting that we will not let the pandemic run our lives. And I understand that the American people expect that, and we're going to deliver it.
With respect to the end of the pandemic, we're not in the end zone yet, but we are inside the red zone. President Biden has quarterbacked this effort, and he is leading the way forward. That is a great thing for the American people.
This might be for Mr. Aguilar. Last week, the RNC passed a resolution that censured Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney in part for being on a committee that was stifling legitimate political discourse. And in the wake of that, the RNC members keep saying that had nothing to do with January 6th. They're talking about oppression of people like elderly RNC members who had nothing to do with January 6th, weren't even in January 6th. Can you address the idea that the committee is somehow going after innocent people who are just trying to speak their mind?
I was shocked to read the statement and saddened. The fact that we have an entire political party that is sanctioning violence that took place that day is deeply disturbing, not just to members of the committee, but to anyone who was here that day. Ask the Capitol Police officers if the people they interacted with were engaged in legitimate political discourse. It's just, at a human level, it's just maddening. 140 Capitol Police officers and Metro Police officers were hurt that day. People lost their lives. And the RNC negotiated this. This was a carefully crafted, carefully worded a document that took them days to hammer out. And so they can't gloss over the fact that this was a mistake, or, oh, we meant it about this. No, that they knew exactly what they were doing. And it's shocking, and as a committee member, I appreciate the work that Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney have done. But our mandate is to get to the truth. That's what all of us voted for up here. All of us voted for, by the way, a commission that was negotiated among Democrats and Republicans that Mitch McConnell torpedoed by asking his caucus to do him a personal favor. So then we engaged in the committee. Everyone standing up here supported the committee. Our responsibility is to get to the truth. That's exactly what we are doing. Many phases of it, I understand, are out of the public realm. There will be a public piece of it in the future, and then we'll culminate in a report that will also talk about the steps we can take to avoid what happened that dark day from ever happening again. That's our responsibility, and that's what we're committed to. But look, Newt Gingrich also said that committee members were going to jail or something. So I don't, like, can't be held responsible for what all of the folks on the other side of the aisle say about what the committee's work is. We've got thick skin, and we've got a job to do, and that's what we're going to do.
Do you feel that the committee's subpoenas have been narrowly tailored, or do you think that perhaps they are going a little far afield right now?
Our subpoenas have been deliberate, they've been thoughtful, and they have been focused on pulling every single thread that will lead to the truth. And so people may not like it, it may be a little uncomfortable for some people, but our job isn't to give comfort to folks who helped out those people. Our job is to tell the truth. And so we'll pull those threads. We're not saying everyone who speaks to us did something wrong. What we're saying is, show us what you know, tell us about what you know, and help us ensure that this never happens again. Thanks.
You know, the C in RNC doesn't stand for committee, it stands for cult. It's not the Republican National Committee, it's the Republican National Cult. That is the only way you can explain how the grand old party would come to the conclusion that people who engaged in rampant mob violence, urinated, defecated, desecrated the Capitol, brutally beat up police officers, seriously injured more than 140. Police officers lost their lives as a result of the events of January 6th. And the cult says it's legitimate political discourse. They've come to that conclusion because they continue to bend the knee to the former twice impeached so-called president, Donald Trump. Ronna McDaniel should be ashamed of herself. What makes it worse is that our Republican colleagues here in the Capitol refuse to denounce it because they're part of the cult as well.
President Biden is a little upset that things are not happening as quickly as they can with his agenda here on Capitol Hill with regards to abortion rights. The Biden administration is now considering possibly looking at some of the abortion issues of having clinics lease land from federal government to be able to perform abortions. Can I get the reaction from the Democratic leadership in the House about this possibility of executive powers being used by the Biden administration?
Well, let me just simply say, and then I yield to Katherine and to the other members of leadership, is that we've got a renegade Supreme Court right now that appears to be on the verge of striking down Roe v. Wade and stripping away health care protections that have been part of the fabric of American society for approximately 50 years. That's problematic. That should trouble all fair-minded Americans. And I know the president is committed to doing everything possible to protect the health care of women and every single American.
We just commemorated the 50th anniversary of the Roe versus Wade decision. And I'm very afraid that may be the last time we get to commemorate that decision may not stand for the next year. And that has such a devastating impact, not only on the lives of women, but on our communities and our economy. We are talking about an effort that was fueled by the Trump administration and their Supreme Court picks to put this issue at the very top of the agenda. And they have been successful in stacking this court. So we have to do every single thing we can to ensure that women's place in our economy is preserved, that women's right to make autonomous decisions about something as fundamental and private as reproductive rights and when to have children is preserved. We can look at this issue around abortion and see the fight that impacts low-income women, women of color, and women in general. This is an issue about equality and fundamental fairness. So I join President Biden in doing everything that we can do to protect this fundamental access to full health care for every single American.
Some pro-life organizations say, what about the life of the unborn?
You know, this is an issue about how women are able to make decisions. This is an issue that is so fundamental. And what we can see from some of my colleagues who will use that very argument is let's look at how we treat children. Let's look who's fighting for children. That is the Democrats in Congress, whether that's safely reopening school, making sure every child has a great start in early education, making sure that our children have clean drinking water, a planet for their future. That is how we build healthy, strong children and families. But we must make sure that at this time where our democracy hangs in the balance, that we are doing everything we can to promote those ideals we talk about liberty, justice, and equality. And reproductive rights has a very strong role in that, and we're going to do everything we can to maintain it.
And let's just be clear, right now, there's a clear difference between the parties on this issue. Could not be more clear. That the Republicans want to ban reproductive freedom in all 50 states. If that's what you want, that's your party. Democrats want you to have the freedom to make those choices for yourself. That's the difference. And if they want to take that argument to the American people, their desire to ban abortion in all 50 states, and if they get what they've fought for years out of the Supreme Court, well, that is a very mean dog catching a very ugly car, and we'll have that conversation.
Thank you both.
Any final questions? Last question. Thank you.
Chairman, when do you expect to see a vote on some sort of conference? USICA competes bill. I know you're talking about wanting to deliver that, but when do you expect to see that?
Well, I'll leave that question for the speaker, who I know is working as hard as possible to bring that about. It's under her leadership that we moved expeditiously on our side of the Capitol to pass the America Competes Act. And we're committed to getting this done, getting this over the finish line, working with the Senate to resolve any differences in legislation, which we think will be resolved in a comprehensive way and in a manner that will allow us to deliver for the American people. Democrats are the party of jobs. Republicans are the party of mobs. And we're going to continue to deliver job growth and economic growth for the American people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I hadn't thought of it until you mentioned it, but thank you.
I'm just trying to manufacture consent.
I gotta do this. No, I gotta just bring it up. Say it again?